Good evening. I'm Stephen Quinn at the Newton Cultural Centre in Surrey, and you're listening to City Votes 2018. Tonight, CBC Vancouver and the University of British Columbia are bringing you live our Surrey mayoral debate for the 2018 municipal election. As I mentioned, I'm Stephen Quinn, the host of the early edition on CBC Radio 1. I will be moderating tonight's debate, and I'd like to begin by acknowledging that the land on which we gather this evening is the traditional and unceded territory of the Coast Salish peoples, specifically the Kwantlen, Katzie, Semiahmoo, and Tsawwassen First Nations. We are broadcasting live on CBC Radio 1. We're live streaming on our website at cbc.ca/BC and on Facebook at CBC Vancouver. Now, Surrey is one of the fastest growing municipalities in British Columbia, and it is expected to become the largest city in the province by 2030. That's according to StatsCan. And with the city adding an average of 1,000 residents a month, there's been a lot of focus on Surrey as it grapples with the future. The next mayor of this city is going to play a very important role in shaping that future. Now, 8 candidates are running for mayor in Surrey, and to provide our audience with the most meaningful broadcast debates possible, we're not able to include all of the candidates in our on-air debate. Now, we've invited 3 candidates based on a combination of criteria, including whether the candidates are incumbents, whether they've held past elected office, and whether they've demonstrated civic engagement experience. I would now like to introduce the candidates participating tonight in no particular order. Bruce Hain is the mayoral candidate for Integrity Now. Tom Gill is the mayoral candidate for Surrey First, and Doug McCallum is the mayoral candidate for the Safer Surrey Coalition. And in our debate tonight, we'll be covering 3 topics with questions from our panel of experts and from the audience and the public. And let me break down the next hour and a half for you. First, we will begin with an opening question for each candidate. Then we'll hear from our panel of experts who will each ask a question for every topic. And the candidates will be given time to answer, and then they'll have an opportunity for some open debate. After that, we will take some questions from our audience. And we will repeat this format for each of the topics. The first is crime and safety. The second is transportation. The third is growth and development. Now, if you do have a question in the audience, you can write it down on a card, as I said, and pass it to someone with a red CBC jacket. We'll try to get to as many of those questions as we can in the short time we have. You can also submit a question through Facebook, if you're watching there, or through YouTube or Twitter. And on Facebook and YouTube, just add your question to the comments section. On Twitter, you can tweet us at CBC News BC. I would like to begin now by asking each candidate, and we have, by the way, drawn for the order here for the first and the last questions. So I'll begin by asking each candidate, why are you the best candidate to lead Surrey at this time? You each have 1 minute to respond, and Doug McCallum, you drew first.
My name's Doug McCallum. I'm running for mayor of the city of Surrey with the Safe Surrey Coalition. Many people throughout Surrey have asked me to step up. They feel the city is declining in so many ways, in safety, in gridlock, in transportation, and heavy growth in infrastructure that doesn't keep up to it. So on day one, the Safe Surrey Coalition will withdraw from the RCMP and form its own Surrey Police. We also will stop light rail and we'll cancel light rail, and we'll build SkyTrain along the Fraser Highway. We will pause growth and turn to smart development. We'll work with the province for a new hospital. We'll cancel the pay parking at City Hall. We'll take the parking meters away from Surrey Memorial Hospital. So on October the 20th, vote for Doug McCallum, the Safe Surrey Coalition. We need to have change in Surrey.
That is time. Thank you very much. Bruce Hain, why are you the best candidate to lead Surrey at this time?
Well, Stephen, thank you for that question, and thanks to the CBC for hosting this event tonight. We really appreciate it. I've been on council for 7 years now, and I have started my own party called Integrity Now. And I really believe that while there are a lot of serious issues that we're facing, whether they be public safety or whether they be transportation or how we grow as a community, I think really this election comes down to leadership and it comes down to vision. And I think that we are at a very, very critical point in Surrey's history where we can go forward, we can go back, or we can stagnate and stay the same. And what we're saying at Integrity Now is that there is a new way to do things at City Hall. There's a way to do things that are open, that are transparent, that are fair, and that are collaborative with the community. And I think this is really what people are looking for. Regardless of the issues, we really need to have leadership that is going to look to the next decade, look to the next 20 years out, and have a real vision for our city. Thank you.
Thank you. That is time. And Tom Gill, why are you the best candidate to lead Surrey at this time?
My name is Tom Gill. I'm a chartered professional accountant. I'm a 4-term counselor, 13 years of experience with council. My journey began 32 years ago. I moved here when I was 18. Surrey gave me a chance, and in that chance, I moved into a basement suite, and that basement suite allowed me to flourish. It allowed me to get an education, allowed me to meet my wife, allowed me to have my kids here. For me, this election is about me giving back to this community. It's about imagining our city. It's about building a 21st century city with bold vision, with bold ideas. You know, for me, this election is about youth and young families, and it's about building civic pride. That's what this election is about for me.
All right, thank you, Tom, and thank you all. Let's introduce our panel of experts in just a moment. Our first topic, though, is crime, and public safety and crime have been a major focus in Surrey, with concerns about gang violence and petty crime and policing. In June, there were 3 high-profile murders with 2 teenagers killed in a targeted shooting in Campbell Heights. A few days later, father and hockey coach was killed in front of his home. And residents tell us that they are also worried about break-ins and vandalism.
The drug violence with the younger youth and the gangs, I think that's a big concern for a lot of the school-age children.
We're right in Surrey Central. I had to go to a shop last night, come through here, and just had a second thought before leaving the house. It's not exactly a family-oriented environment at night here.
And let's introduce now our panel of experts who will be asking questions throughout the debate this evening. Gerald Byer is a political scientist at UBC. He's with us in the front row. Jesse Johnston is the CBC South of Fraser reporter. And I'll ask Gerald Byer to begin with a question for the candidates.
Gentlemen, does Surrey need more police officers? And should they be RCMP or should they be a local force?
Each of you will have 1 minute to respond, and then we'll open it up to debate. Doug McCallum.
Surrey needs its own Surrey police force. We need officers that will have their careers in Surrey, will spend the time, will be part of our community, will bond with our community. They'll be just like our community, walking their kids. They'll live in Surrey. They'll be trained in urban policing, which is very different than rural policing. And we also, most importantly, will have a police board, which is made up of Surrey residents that will address and look at the problems in Surrey. Because they live in Surrey, they will be able to act quickly on some of the problems that we face in our city. We need our own police force, especially with the management in Surrey that will manage the police force.
All right. Thank you, Doug McCallum. Bruce Hain.
Well, thanks for that. And certainly, whether we actually eventually move to a municipal police force or we stick with the RCMP, it would take a great deal of time to move to a municipal police force. 6 or 7 years it would take, and it would be very costly. And what we're saying is, in the meantime, whether we move to that model or we don't, what we need right now is to provide the RCMP with the tools and the resources that they need to do the job that we're asking them to do. And so we've committed to 40 new police officers, 40 new RCMP officers per year for the next 4 years, which is 160 RCMP officers to come into the detachment. That would allow us to have school liaison officers in every single high school in the district. That would allow us to have more police officers on road safety and so on. And really, when we talk about drugs and gangs, that criminal element is being very, very well served in terms of investigative work by the RCMP and the targeted gangs that we have.
Thank you, Bruce. And Tom Gill.
For me, I think that the real question is, has the city of Surrey outgrown the RCMP? I think that's a question that we need to come back and talk to our residents about. Certainly when we're looking at the governance and looking at how the RCMP operates, there's no question. We need to have a police board in the city. We need to ensure that we have educators, researchers, and our community participate in how we allocate our resources here. It's very critical. I think that when we're looking at our 5-year plan that we've committed to, it's a 5-year, $50 million plan. We've got $7.5 million earmarked for intervention for our youth. We've got $22.5 million earmarked for prevention programs, again, for our youth. And our plan, when we're looking at policing, we're also looking at 25 officers over the next 5 years. So each year, every year.
We've now got 3 minutes for an open debate where the candidates can interact with and challenge each other. And I'll throw out a question, which is more police officers in Surrey going to solve anything? Who'd like to take that one?
Well, it certainly will solve certain issues. It's not going to solve all our issues. And gang violence and criminal gang activity and the demand for street-level drugs is a much broader issue than just enforcement. But what we need to do is to provide our RCMP with those tools that they need to do their job. And when we look at going to a municipal police force, and Doug says that we'd throw them out the first day that we got in office and so on, that's a very, very expensive proposition, and we haven't heard how that's going to be costed whatsoever. And I would like to see how on earth that he would cost that, because the Richmond RCMP looked at that. It was going to be $50 million, and they're a quarter the size of we are.
Let Doug respond.
First of all, in talking with the police chiefs around Metro Vancouver, it is their opinion that it is time for Surrey to have its own police force, but that we could be up and operating with the permission of the federal government within 2 years. The city already owns all the police cars. Our own CUPE staff, 300 of them, provide the administration to the RCMP. We own the community police stations. The only change we will have to make is with officers, and it again is the opinion of the police chiefs around the region that probably 50 or 60 of the RCMP will move over. Justice Institute can ramp up and provide police officers, and we will get officers from Vancouver and West Van because their families live out here and they would love to live here. So we can do it very quickly with the cooperation of the federal government.
And just a reminder that you can address each other directly here. Tom.
Absolutely. I think that when you look at the last 4 years, we've made some historic investments. We've hired 138 officers over the last 4 years. So my question back to Doug is, Doug, you still have not been clear in terms of the officer count that you're offering over the next term. I want some clarity around that. And I'm also looking at some of your costing that you've prepared in terms of being able to manage that transition, both the costs associated to that transition and the ongoing costs associated to the new police force that you referred to.
Well, first of all, on the costs, because we do own all the police cars and our staff, CUPE staff, as I mentioned, we're looking at just the police officers in Surrey, and that it would, federal government, the city pays 90% of the officers, the federal government pays 10% of the officers. So we would have to have 10% increase. It will cost more money for our own city police,
Doug,
but our residents around are willing to pay more money so that their communities feel safer with our own police force.
Doug, I'm looking for your plan. How many officers are you proposing to bring on in the next 4 years, Doug? That's what the question is.
We are looking at the current staff of RCMP and increase.
And what is that number, Doug?
It's about 750.
No, Doug, it's 835, Doug. 835. Doug.
I would have to question. I have talked to the superintendent. It's published as 835, but because a whole bunch of our officers are in the integrated force, it actually officers in Surrey is only at 775.
That is time for that portion of the debate. Thank you, all three of you. Our next question comes from CBC's South of Fraser reporter Jesse Johnston.
What are your plans to keep young people away from gangs and crime in the city?
And we'll begin with Tom Gill on that one.
You know, that's a real easy question for us. You know, we've been very bold in terms of our mandate. You know, we are going outside of our mandate. There's no question. You know what? We've got $7.5 million earmarked for intervention. And that program specifically is identifying those kids that currently are in gangs. We've got another $22.5 million that's earmarked for prevention programs. And that particular money is earmarked for not only the young kids that have been identified at youth at risk, but their siblings and their parents. You know, we're also proposing to open up a hub with a 1-800 line. I need help. That's what that line is going to be looking like. You know what? We need to ensure that this community have those resources for our youth. And finally, I think that the big thing that we've done is that we are proposing to ensure that there are no barriers in our city. We want to make sure that all our civics facilities are open to our youth under 18 years old. You know what? We're going to empower them. We're going to take those barriers away. We're going to make sure that these kids have opportunities to learn and get good hobbies and interests.
Bruce Hayne, 1 minute.
Well, thank you. First of all, we need to put a school liaison RCMP officer in every high school in the district. It is no longer acceptable that we have one officer for several high schools because they simply can't get into the culture of the school, they can't get to know the kids, and they can't get to work within each of the schools. So that's the first thing that we do. The second thing is to provide programs, after-school programs, both elementary and high school, and not provide those in the rec centers, but provide those in the schools, because it's often very difficult for kids to get from the schools to the rec centers after school, and certainly the parents are off working and can't do those jobs. So we need to have those programs for the kids in the schools to be able to mentor them, to be able to help them stay away from the drugs and gangs. And those are the kinds of programs that are going to be most effective to keep the kids out of gangs coming into the future. Thank you.
Doug McCallum, 1 minute.
We've talked to many people in the community, and the key time for gangs to pick up new recruits is after school, when they get out at 2:30 until their parents come home for supper. There's a 3-hour gap in there. I have a personal experience where my son was teaching at Tomanas, and to keep the kids active after school, he started a rugby team. And in fact, one of the people in the rugby team came up to me the other day and said that because the rugby team was active after school, then that kept him away from the gangs who were trying to recruit them in that period of time after school. So we need to promote and be sure that we have programs for those kids in that period of time when they get out, and while the gangs are out, they're just waiting for them as they hang out at the different parks and so forth. The other thing is we do need liaison officers in that period of time in the schools throughout Surrey.
Doug McCallum, thank you. And now we'll have 3 minutes of open debate.
Doug,
again, feel free to address each other directly.
Doug, I appreciate your comments, but again, the question was, what are you going to actually do? You gave us a really great story about what your son does, but where are the resources? Where's the allocations? Where can we see something concrete where someone can rely on some funds and some resources to introduce some opportunities for kids? This is your son that is providing a sport. I'm assuming that we need something that's going to be sustainable and ongoing. I'm not sure your son's going to be able to provide that level of commitment for the next foreseeable future, Doug.
Well, I'd like to just say to that, it's interesting that you haven't listened or haven't read any of our press releases that we've put out. One of the programs that we're going to do in the Parks and Rec is build an awful lot more playing fields around the city. The parks, as you know, are beside schools in a lot of cases, and we're going to build sports fields and rec centers so that the kids after school can be active and get to participate and keep them away from the schools.
Doug,
now, we announced that 3 weeks ago when we had meetings with people in the community and what could we do. One of the areas is in the Newton area in the northwest corner. We are going to build a large recreation center there because the current government, both of you, have not provided the right services in the northwest corridor of Surrey. We need a new recreation center
if we
there,
could let Bruce
and we're going to build that
let's
in
allow
the
Bruce
new
to
year.
jump in here,
Doug,
please. Thank
Doug,
you.
outside the Surrey Sport and Leisure Center that was built well over
Or Tom.
2 decades ago, that was the only key investment that you as mayor made in the city. So I challenge you, Doug, please provide me a list of the recreational facilities that you made, that you were responsible for, that you brought to this community. You absolutely made no investment in those kids at that time, in that decade, while you were the mayor, Doug. Absolutely none.
We did. We, in fact, built a ton of playing
Doug,
fields.
Doug,
I was the
which
first
one?
one to
Doug?
put artificial fields.
There was only
in
one turf
Surrey,
field in 2005, Doug.
And during the last
There was only one
there,
turf field in 2005,
there was
Doug.
one built every year for the last 4 years that I was mayor, because the commitment I gave to the people of Surrey that we were going to build a lot more playing fields. We put a track field in South Surrey. We built and improved a lot of the recreation centers. We built Fleetwood Community Center. We designed and built Guildford, and the pool came afterwards. There was a lot of facilities, and I was always one in the Parks and Rec to make sure that we build a lot of recreation facilities for the city, and we're going to continue that if we get elected in the future.
If I could step in here, guys, because I know, Tom, you were on Doug's team so you guys should know what each other did. But what we're proposing is to have a youth recreation facility in Newton, because a lot of kids are not into sports. They're not into competitive sports and sports fields and so on. So we're going to have a rec center for youth that is going to be drama, arts, and dance and so on, that other kids can have a safe place to recreate in.
And that is time, and thank you all three of you again. And now we're going to hear a question from the floor. Anita Bath is our reporter on the floor. And Anita, what have you got for us there?
All right, first of all, lots of comments coming in on Facebook Live. A lot of people actually saying that they don't think money should go toward a municipal police force. But let's do a question from the audience. I'm wondering why, when stats indicate crime rates are actually going down in Surrey, homicides are down, business break-ins are down, residential break-ins are down, why is there a call for more police officers and more money to be given to the city of Surrey and crime? Would money not be better spent on poverty reduction strategies and programs for youth?
Thank you, Anita. And we'll begin with Bruce Hain, 1 minute to tackle that question.
Well, thank you. And it's not an either or as far as I'm concerned, it's both. And we need to have more police officers in Surrey. Crime is slowly going down, and we're very fortunate to have those stats moving in that direction. But quite frankly, we still have too many homicides and too much gunplay on our streets, particularly with gang violence and so on. So what we need to be doing is putting a lot of effort and a lot of resources into detox and long-term recovery beds. Because if we don't do anything about the demand side of the street-level drug equation, then we are not going to be able to shift the needle on the supply side of the drug supply equation, which is the gangs. And so we need to be reducing the street-level demand for those drugs so that we can hurt the gangsters in the pocketbooks.
Tom Gill, 1 minute.
No question. I think that when you're looking at the issues that we're faced with, the crime severity index is no different than that of Vancouver. I think the perception and the reality of crime are different in the city, and I think that many times people think that we have additional issues outside of what's happening in the Lower Mainland. Make no mistake, when you're talking about gangs, it's a regional issue, it's not a Surrey issue, just to be very clear. But certainly when you're looking at the opportunity to support our community, there's no question. I think housing plays a significant role to ensure that our community is safe, ensuring that youth have an opportunity to succeed. There's no question. So we need to make sure that the allocations that we make in the city are going to help our youth, help our young families succeed in the city, because it's critical.
Hey, Doug McCallum.
Yeah, I agree with the last two comments, but I also think in our city that as I've traveled around it, the people feel very, very unsafe, and the statistics do not show that. It's the drive-by shootings that happen literally every other night that don't get reported. In the last 3 nights alone, each night there's been a major stabbing in some parts of Surrey. Those are the things that do not get reported, and those are the things that make our community feel unsafe. In Newton, just a month ago, a car went into a neighborhood in a cul-de-sac and shot 9 shots into the house. Can you imagine living in that cul-de-sac with your family that live beside that house? They feel very, very unsafe. They stay in their houses. They don't come out on the streets. We want people to be out and enjoying our parks and so forth. That's why we need our own Surrey police force that's trained in urban policing, and which is, by the way, 40% of the crime in the cities. It is based on social issues.
That is time, Doug McCallum. Thank you so much. 3 minutes of open debate now.
I've been very clear. I've been very clear in terms of the resources that I'm proposing to implement here in Surrey. 25 officers each year, every year for the next 5 years. Bruce has been very clear. 40 officers each year, every year for the next 4 years. Doug, I'm going to ask you a question. How many officers are you looking at over your next term, and what is the cost associated to those officers, Doug? And just to be really clear, I want to understand, what the role would be looking like when you have a municipal force in terms of your changes that you're proposing on day one.
Okay, on day one, we will leave the number of officers, like both of you have done with the RCMP, depends on our new police chief. Whatever he requests as far as Surrey was thing, we will
Doug,
fund.
I think the people of the city, I think the people of the city deserve to know how many officers you're proposing and what the budget is going to be and how you're going to pay for it, Doug. It's a very simple question.
Well, how we're going to pay for it is we're going to make it a lot more efficient in the city of Surrey and our budgets, and we're going to assume the increase, which is roughly 10% per officer. We're going to
Doug,
absorb that in the
what is that
city
number,
budget,
Doug,
and
what is
there are
that
so
number?
many efficiencies.
Doug,
When I was mayor,
Doug, what is that
in
number,
fact, if we want to look at the financial situation of the city, I'll do a comparison of the financial picture
Doug,
when
with
I
all due
left,
respect, what is
where
that number,
it is
Doug?
today.
What is that number
Can-
for both the members,
Okay.
and what is that number
Let's
for
let Bruce in here,
for
please, if we
process?
can.
Stephen, if I could, thank you very much. Let's bring this back to the question at hand and the public safety. And quite frankly, a municipal police force is not going to cost 10% more. It's going to cost 30 or 40% more. And that's because immediately it will be unionized. And with unionization comes higher salaries, and not just higher salaries, but different working conditions, like 2 members per car at night, and so on and so on. And so we are not talking about an incremental slight increase in policing costs. So what we need to do is we need to look at our total safety, public safety budget, and we need to be able to see what is the best bang for our buck. We have E-Division in the city of Surrey. There's 2,000 men and women that work at E-Division every single day. All the target teams are there. All the crime analyst teams are there. We have, and while they're not men and women on our streets doing the beat, those are 2,000 pairs of eyes and ears. Those are 2,000 residents that living in Surrey that care about us. And those are the intangibles that we simply will not get with just tossing them out to the curb and going with a municipal force tomorrow.
Doug McCallum?
Yeah, I just wanted to remind both of them, which they know, is the RCMP is going to unionize within 2 years. And within 2 years, they're going to have the same salary base as Vancouver, Delta, and West Van. So there is no difference in that. You're going to have to absorb that increase, even if you stay with the RCMP.
Doug, do you have a public safety platform that's any different than other than just turfing out the RCMP? Is there anything else? Is there any other validity to your plan, for your public safety plan?
Very clearly, I've already suggested
That
it.
is time. Thank you very much. Appreciate it again, all three of you. And we have another question from the audience. Anita Bath.
There's been a lot of talk tonight about programs and implementing more programs, but I have Karen here from the audience who works directly with youth, and she has a question.
So we talk about youth at risk. I had the privilege of sitting with 15 youth who were very clear recently with the Prime Minister that their programs were all slashed. I work with Surrey Crime Prevention. We had 50 youth at risk in our program. We have no sustainable funding. We rely on grants 100%. I want to thank the City of Surrey for their grant with us, but sustainable funding is something that's critical. And what these kids said to us is it starts between the ages of 8 and 11. So your idea of putting liaison officers in every high school, that's not good enough. We need to start at an earlier age. So what are you prepared to do as candidates to get to our kids earlier for prevention? Because intervention, in my opinion, is a little too late to deal with these kids. We need prevention in a big way.
I'll begin with Tom Gill for that 1 minute. Tom, thank you for that question.
There's no question. And again, I'm really clear on the numbers, $7.5 million for intervention and $22.5 million for prevention. We understand that. We know it's an issue. We know that kids as young as 10 years old from 3 to 6 p.m. are getting in trouble. They are unsupervised. That's the sweet spot. That's the time we need to ensure that we have resources available. We need to be creative. We need to have resources for those kids right after school so that they can go into a program. You know what? For me, it's really important. Not only do the kids have an opportunity to listen to engage in sports, but also the opportunity to engage in culture, music, theater, those kind of elements. So we want to give these kids opportunities that they don't utilize right now.
Doug McCallum?
We need to make sure our kids, when we go, and I walk my grandkids to school in elementary schools, we need, in talking with the parents there, we need to keep our kids active, again, after school, even in elementary school. At the school I walk them to, they have a program outside that's an exercise program. They also have a playground where they go and get supervised. They encourage the kids to be active after school. Many times in elementary, it's encouraged that the parents actually pick them up and also take part in the activities after school. There's all sorts of programs that are done. I believe strongly that we do need to have police liaison officers in the elementary schools also, because I think it's important to recognize that, yes, they can get in trouble even at an early age. It's very, very critical to me to be sure that we provide help to those kids and to those families.
Thank you, Doug. And Bruce Hain.
Well, thanks very much, and thanks to Karen for that question, because she works very hard with the Surrey Crime Prevention Society. Several years ago, the auxiliary program of the RCMP nationally was gutted by Ottawa, by the federal RCMP, as a result of a tragedy that happened in Moncton, New Brunswick. And that program is just now coming back in line. I sit on the Local Government Contract Management Committee with the RCMP, with the Solicitor General's Office. I co-chair that with the Solicitor General's Office. And we've been working very hard with Ottawa to bring that program back, because municipalities right across BC want that auxiliary program and want it in a robust way that we can help our RCMP officers and train and provide meaningful volunteer positions for those people in our community that want to support that. We also need to have an armory south of the Fraser and in Surrey, so that we can build up our cadet corps and so on with all three branches of the military. So those are the things that we would do with youth.
And that is time. Thank you. And now 3 minutes for open debate, and please feel free to address each other.
You know, the question was very clear. The question was, where are the sustainable funds and what is the commitment? I'm telling you, we are going outside of our mandate. Surrey First is going well outside of our mandate. Legislative responsibility sits with both the federal and provincial government. Let me be very clear. We have gone outside of our mandate. We've made that commitment. It's in our platform. We've been very clear. I've asked both Councillor Bruce Hayne and I asked Doug McCallum, what is your commitment to sustainability and what level of funding are you prepared to provide when it comes to the initiatives that Karen just spoke of?
Well, when you talk about going outside your mandate, Tom, you talk about spending money that Surrey taxpayers' money on things that usually municipal governments don't spend money on. We would
these
work with...
These are bold ideas, Councillor.
Yes,
very
they are bold.
ideas.
But what we would do is work with other partners and work with third-party partners to ensure that that funding and those resources are there for our kids. And let me say this.
Bruce, what have you accomplished in the 7 years? Have you brought anything in the last 7 years?
Just let me answer your question. What we would do is we would bring CCTV cameras in around our elementary and our high schools to provide safety for our kids. We're going to provide after-school programs that are at the schools, not at the recreation centers where the kids can't get to, but at the schools, and do that in collaboration with our school district. We need a new relationship with our school district, with SD 36. We need a new relationship with the Ministry of Education that provides programs and provides funding. There is only one taxpayer,
Bruce,
and so we need to provide
I asked you the
those.
question, if the federal government and the provincial government don't come to the table, where are those resources? My commitment is, regardless of them coming to the table or not, I'm prepared to put $30 million on the table for the next 5 years. Bruce, I asked you the question again. Are you prepared to make that level of commitment for this community? These are our youth. Our youth are currently in trouble. When you're looking at the dollars invested, for every dollar that we invest in both intervention and prevention, we have a $25 return, a $25 return.
Well, if you think that spending $30 million is going to fix some issue that you believe that we have, I would suggest that a vast majority of our youth are doing extremely well.
That's the number one issue, Bruce. Right now, our youth is the number one issue.
Our youth need our support. There's no question about it. But we need to do it collaboratively with the school district and with senior levels of government. And we are not prepared to go it alone.
Doug, may I ask you your commitment to sustainability on this issue, Dick? Well, and what's your commitment in terms of dollars?
My commitment is certainly towards that. But I think that also we have to call upon the parents to step up. I mean, this is something that we all need
Doug,
to...
it's not working, Doug. It's not working, Doug.
We need to make an emphasis on encouraging our families to work together. Everybody has to step up to solve this problem. It's
Doug,
not, you
Doug,
just
I'm
don't pour
about
money
how important
into
is this for you,
the
Doug?
situation, because that has
to
not
this,
happened before. We have to
Doug?
encourage our families to work together with us, with the schools, so that together we can get our kids become safe and become active, and you know, it will develop a family relationship that we need
Doug
to
McCallum,
build
that
again.
is time on this issue. Thank you very much. My apologies for talking over you there. Appreciate your debate, all three of you. We are going to switch topics. A reminder that you're listening to City Votes 2018. I'm Stephen Quinn at the Newton Cultural Centre in Surrey. Tom Gill, Bruce Hain, Doug McCallum, three of the candidates running for mayor in Surrey. Now, our second issue is transportation and transit, and the federal and local governments have committed funds for the $1.65 billion Surrey-Newton-Guilford light rail line. There is, though, still debate about whether that project ought to go ahead, and with the population growing, it's pretty clear that the current transit system isn't serving Surrey very well, and certainly isn't going to serve it into the future. You've got the aging Patella Bridge as well, the need to service a landmass that is larger than Vancouver and Burnaby and Richmond combined. So what can the city do to help people get around Surrey effectively? And should Surrey stick with the LRT system as proposed, or look at a SkyTrain, or look at something else? And we went to the streets with that question.
LRT would be faster and also more convenient because SkyTrain breaks down half the time.
The LRT size of the track is pretty small, like you don't need to put a lot of people inside. It's kind of like the size of 96. So for that reason, I feel like maybe SkyTrain's better.
To me, it's just a waste of money. Might as well just build the SkyTrain going all the way down. I think it'd be better that way. Easier commute and less traffic on the road.
And some voices from the streets of Surrey. And we will ask our South of Fraser reporter, Jesse Johnston, to begin with a question for the candidates here.
Well, on that, I went to high school about 4 blocks away from here, and when I was a student about 20 years ago, we were waiting for rapid transit, and they're still waiting for rapid transit now. So how do you go about fixing that?
You've each got 1 minute to respond to the question. Thank you, Jesse. Doug McCallum, we'll begin with you.
First of all, we build SkyTrain. We stop light rail. There's no contract signed. Nothing has been signed on it. We stop it on day one, and we start to build SkyTrain from our city center out through Fleetwood, Clayton, into Langley. We have the money. The $1.65 billion will be able to build it, especially when you compare it to the Evergreen line that was finished a year and a half ago. And it is elevated the same way, same distance of city center to Langley. It actually goes through a tunnel. It came in at a fixed price at the end, on cost at $1.4 billion. You add just inflation for a couple of years, and you still have lots of money to build the Fraser Highway SkyTrain. Has been chairman of TransLink for 5 years. The rest of the region has all changed from light rail to SkyTrain. The people of Surrey just want the same as the rest of the region in SkyTrain.
Thank you. Bruce Hain.
Well, thank you. And certainly what we would do is press pause on LRT. There hasn't been a good business case for LRT made. TransLink's own documents and own analysis back to 2012 shows that SkyTrain would be the best route as far as cost per kilometer per ridership, and LRT would actually be the worst. And when you look at the distance between along 104th from Guildford to city center, again, TransLink's own documents show that route would be well served by buses till 2042. So we have to look and take that $1.6 billion that has been approved, and we have to ensure that we use it. But we have to look at what is the best technology, and quite frankly, the best technology around the Lower Mainland has been SkyTrain. We need to take a regional look at this. If we're going to connect Langley, if we're going to go out and connect Abbotsford in a few years from now, we need to take a regional look at this, and we need to be a leader in the region and do the right thing and put SkyTrain in, which is what has been popular everywhere else in the region.
Thank you. And Tom Gill.
You know, I think when you're looking at true leadership is to come up with a plan. This city came up with a plan in 2008. And in fact, since that time, over the last decade, 10 years, we've been lobbying both the federal and provincial government for monies. Councillor Hain has been with me on my side. And in fact, in 2016, on his Twitter account, said it's time for LRT. I think the key for us is that, look, you know, we have money. It's an opportunity for us to take the city to the next level. We have 10.5 kilometers on the Surrey-Newton-Guilford line, 10.5 kilometers. We've got 200,000 people that live on that line within 5-minute walking distance. It makes sense. The experts tell us that on day one, this mode of transportation is going to be very successful. This opportunity for us is just that. We have not received any significant funds from any major funding body in the last 35 years. This money will transition our city and it'll take us to the next level. When you're looking at world-class cities such as Abu Dhabi and Dubai, the LRT is a fantastic opportunity when it comes to transportation in that city.
And that is time. And now we've got 3 minutes to open up the debate, give each of you a chance to interact with each other and challenge each other. Bruce?
Thank you, Stephen. And going back to your comments, Tom, 2008, that technology and that route was decided. That was many years before I even came on council that route and that technology was
Bruce,
decided. So hang on a sec.
You're saying every corporate report since 2011 to date.
I have voted. So let me answer your question. I have voted to receive the corporate reports for information. Why wouldn't I receive corporate reports for information? That's what we do. We get information. But the fact is, the public has said that we don't want LRT. The SkyTrain's own policies and own documents suggest that LRT is not the best route, and I am willing to say, you know what, I've looked at this every which way, and I am prepared to move off of LRT and go to SkyTrain, which is the best solution.
I'm just really concerned with the political opportunism and when it comes to this opportunity. Both in 2014, Doug, and in 2014, you, Bruce, both endorsed LRT at that time. No question. You both know it. Number two, when you're looking at the costs associated to LRT, Doug, you're lying. You know that TransLink issued out a report saying that it's going to cost $2.9 billion to take SkyTrain out to Langley's. Here you are with a straight face telling this audience that it's going to cost $1.4 billion.
Yeah, and I will
this is
say
experts,
again,
Doug. These are experts telling us what those numbers are, Doug. These are absolute experts from TransLink.
I've worked with TransLink, and I will tell
Doug,
you, every figures they put out
and in the 6
have
years
been
that we
wrong
chair, Doug,
in the Metro Vancouver. In Canada Line, they continually TransLink in their figures. They put in things like it's contingency at 30%, which is a ridiculous figure. So what I'm saying, contingency should always be put in at roughly 10%. They also always build the most expensive line. For instance, the line along SkyTrain, along Fraser Highway, we're going to put it at ground level for over 25% of it. That's the cheapest transportation.
Doug, when you were chair.
We also, let me finish for a second.
Doug, when you were chair, you got no.
Let him finish, please.
The order in Metro Vancouver that all the mayors for 30 years has approved is to build the Expo line, and then the Millennium line, then the Canada line, then the Evergreen, and then Surrey's turn to do SkyTrain, and then the sixth one was to do the Broadway corridor. Every mayor, many mayors that changed, always voted for that. When it came time for Surrey's time, Surrey first, both people here said no. We're going to build light rail. The people of Surrey want the same as the whole region has had, which has been successful in the region. And so what we're saying to you, we're going to give. It's not you and I, Tom, or Bruce, that says what system's going to be run. It's the people of the city that wants the system. And that's why we're building SkyTrain.
That is time on that 3-minute debate.
Doug used all that time.
And that is that time, and I am trying to be fair about it, and I do appreciate it. You've had an opportunity to speak at length as well, I'll remind you, Tom. To another question from Gerald Beyer from UBC, our panelist. Gerald.
So I heard a lot about TransLink from you all just now. Is Surrey well served by TransLink? Is being part of a regional transportation plan and body a good thing for Surrey?
Thank you, Gerald. And each again 1 minute to respond, and we'll have an open debate after. And Bruce Hain first for this one, please.
Well, thank you. And certainly being part of a regional body in a regional district is always a good thing, because we can work on solutions together. And these issues, our transportation issues, are not in isolation. Surrey does not have an isolated transportation issue that Langley doesn't have, or Delta doesn't have, or New West doesn't have. We need to solve these issues regionally. Sometimes the children get at the table at Metro Vancouver, and quite frankly, it's fairly ugly, and we've seen that tonight. But what we need to do as a group is we need to come together and look at what is best for the region. And we need to look out 20 and 30 years in the region and say, look, we need to do this right. And one of those things that we need to do right is to hook up to the current rapid transit system in the region, which is SkyTrain. And everywhere that SkyTrain has been developed in the region, not only has it been successful, but it's been wildly successful beyond ridership projections. So we need to work as a group with Metro Vancouver and with TransLink to come up with the best solutions for the entire region.
Thank you, Bruce. Tom Gill.
So there's no question. I think that when you're looking at a regional model such as TransLink, it's a good thing. There's no question. I think that the real issue that we're talking about in Surrey is that we receive half the service of those people that are in Vancouver, less than half, in fact. In fact, it might be down as low as quarter. There's no question that this region is not well served south of the Fraser. But when you're looking at what the future holds, the future, without question, rapid transit and looking at transportation choices is going to be different in the future. The cost of cars, the cost of gas, insurance, parking is just too high. The young youth in our community understand that, and they understand that reality. This is the only region in North America that has had double-digit increases in transportation utilization. So it's something that we need to embrace. It's something that we need to ensure that those investments and those key capital investments continue to be made. That's why I've been advocating really hard for 150 kilometers of LRT in this city, and over the next 25 and 30 years, I'm hoping that comes to fruition.
All right, thank you. And Doug McCallum.
I think the concept of TransLink, the governance model, is a good model. I think it has worked for the region fairly well. The problem we have is that the people that work in TransLink do not listen to different cities around the region, and they apply what they think's best rather than listening to the people. Example is when we were starting to look at Canada Line, TransLink said we want light rail down the Arbutus corridor. And the people in the city of Surrey rebelled against that, very much like what's happening in Surrey.
City of Vancouver, as I recall.
Yeah, City of Vancouver, sorry. And the people wanted SkyTrain, which we built there. Evergreen Line, exactly the same thing. It started out, TransLink wanted to build light rail down the abandoned rail line. The people in the Tri-Cities rebelled and said they wanted SkyTrain. Exactly the same system as here. TransLink, again, here in Surrey, didn't listen to the people in Surrey, did no public consulting, just demanded that they do light rail along with the Surrey Council. And we need to change that.
Thank you, and that is time.
So my question.
3 minutes of open debate now, please.
So my question is to Doug. Doug, you were the chair. You had a tenure at TransLink. I believe was it 6 years or 9 years, Doug?
I was on the board for 9 years.
You were the chair for how many years, Doug?
4 or 5.
And in that tenure, what rapid transit expansion projects did you bring to Surrey? And in terms of visioning over the long term, whether it was 20, 30 years, at what time and place did you actually have any plans in place at TransLink to support any transit initiatives in this great city?
Well, actually, we did a lot. We got about 90% of the road money from that. So we built 152nd, we did it, did 64th, did 88th, we did 1/2. So we did Fraser Highway, all with TransLink money. We also built a bridge across the Fraser River called the Golden Ears Bridge, which was a major project that linked Surrey to the other shore. We also did a lot of buses.
That's not a TransLink project.
It was a TransLink program.
It was a public-private partnership.
Yeah, but it was a TransLink funded, or TransLink governed in decision.
Doug, that's the project that lost $40 million a year, correct, Doug?
No, the fact remains, if you want to look at projects that lose a lot of money, there's a lot of other projects around.
Doug,
but it was designed to improve the traffic flow between Surrey and the other thing. The other thing that was done is we did all highway buses that link South Surrey thing. So we did a lot in that time. I also was chair of the Canada Line when it was built, and I was also the chair when we started to develop the Evergreen. And it was the order in the region that all mayors supported, meaning that it was Surrey's turn after the Evergreen Line to get the money, and it was year 2 on Surrey First that stopped that. It was Surrey's turn to get SkyTrain out Fraser Highway.
And let's let Tom respond, please.
So, Doug, the question again is that I'm sure that at the time that you were chair, was there some clear objectives? Was there a business plan? Was there any plans that you made for rapid transit? I'm not talking about the roads, Doug. I'm talking about rapid transit, whether it was SkyTrain or LRT, whatever it may be. Were there any plans in place that you endorsed that were ready to go for Surrey at that time?
Yes, there was. The board, over 30 years, each year, and when I was chair all the time, I made sure it was that when Canada Line was built Evergreen would build, and the plans and signed that the SkyTrain would be built in Surrey after the
So
Evergreen.
you're-
That has always been the order in Metro Vancouver for 30 years until you stopped it.
And quite frankly, I mean, Diane Watts was a big proponent of LRT. She went down to Portland with her council at the time back in 2008, had a look at that, got really excited about LRT. She pushed for that, and then Linda Hepner came in after that, and you sat at the TransLink board as her substitute, Tom. And now we're faced with a position where the city doesn't want LRT, they want SkyTrain.
That is time on that question. Thank you all once again very much. And we're going to go back to Anita Bath, our reporter, who is taking questions from our audience. Anita.
All right, well, as you know, Surrey is the fastest growing city in this province. A lot of young people, a lot of students here, and we have a student to ask a question. Christina.
Thank you so much. It's really exciting to see how the importance of youth is taking a large part of the discussion in this election. Post-secondary students are a significant youth group impacted by municipal decision-making, especially in regards to transit. Especially considering many students are commuting hours to schools like UBC, not to mention staff and faculty members. How do candidates plan to be champions in connecting regions like Vancouver and Surrey through public transportation?
All right, thank you for that question. And we'll give everybody a minute to tackle that one, and we will begin with Tom Gill.
No question. That's something that I totally endorse. I think that, you know what, I've been very clear. I want our residents to live, work, and play in this great city. In fact, I want to take our post-secondary education institutions to another level. I want to make sure that our kids in this region have an opportunity to be able to seize education and seize those post-secondary education opportunities. And again, it's critical. I think that we need to be bold, we need to be different, and we need to ensure that we underwrite and subsidize this opportunity for kids. They're going to get into the habit and the good habit of utilizing rapid transit, and this is something I totally endorse. I think that we should be looking at long-term objectives where we actually, in fact, reduce the cost of users when it relates specifically to students. So that's something that I'm really key on moving forward with.
All right, thank you. And Doug McCallum.
Yeah, I think if we look at light rail, certainly the proposal in Surrey is not going to link students to any of the universities around. So SkyTrain will. We're doing an extension of the Expo line. The Expo line already carries 100,000 people a day. It's got a built-in ridership before it's even built. And students that live in Clayton, for instance, will be able to get to UBC or to Simon Fraser. When I was chair of TransLink, I brought in a program where we gave student passes. In other words, students got a reduced fare on our transportation system, on our rapid transit system to go to college and to move around the region, because it's that important to us that our students are able to get around to the different campuses and get the education that they need. And so we would be very strong believers in getting SkyTrain built as fast as we can, especially for the students to get to the different colleges.
Thank you. And Bruce Hain.
Well, thank you. And it's a major part of our policy, and it's written in our policy, which I don't think the other two slates have. But just as a quick aside, my daughter's been going to UBC for the past 5 years, she's just getting her teacher's certificate this year. We live in Cloverdale, and there's simply no way for her to get to UBC every day via transit. And so she drives every day, and that is really unfortunate. What we need is more post-secondary seats south of the Fraser. We need those in Surrey, and we need those now. So we're going to be advocating and working with the Ministry of Advanced Education to get a BCIT campus south of the Fraser, to get a medical school south of the Fraser. Surrey Memorial Hospital is a UBC teaching hospital, but we need to go further than that. We need to have a medical school south of the Fraser, because we know where kids or students learn is where they stay. And so we need to give our kids the opportunities not only to have their education, but to start their careers right here in Surrey. And that's why we need more post-secondary seats south of the Fraser.
And we can have some, thank you. And 3 minutes for open debate on this subject, and we will begin with Tom.
Sure. I think that when you're looking at this opportunity, and I've been very clear, Surrey needs 150 kilometers of LRT, and that's something that we've envisioned. It's great getting students to downtown, if in fact that's what Doug wants to achieve. I think that, you know, when you're moving students from Langley on the proposed on the proposed SkyTrain extension that's being proposed by Doug, is just that. I think that what we need to understand is that we need to move our students around. We have 6 town centers. And Doug, I'm just trying to better understand, how are you going to move the city of Surrey students? 1/3 of our population is under the age of 19, guys. 1/3. They need some help to be able to maneuver and get through the city. Cars are too expensive. Insurance is too expensive. Gas is too expensive. Can you imagine paying for parking every day? It's just too much. We need to ensure that we provide our youth with these opportunities so that they're going to be successful. I'm not wanting to help the kids in Langley just yet. I want to help my kids in Surrey first. Doug?
Well, it's very simple. If you read our platform, is the SkyTrain goes along Fraser Highway. We're going to put fast bus lanes, bus lane only, to connect to SkyTrain. So from Cloverdale, there's going to be fast bus lane only to the SkyTrain to hook up with that. From Guildford, we're going to build fast bus lanes down 152nd, hooking up to Fraser Highway. From Newton, we're going to do fast bus lanes, bus lane onlys, to hook up to the King George, to the SkyTrain. That's the backbone of our system as far as transportation is concerned.
Doug,
as far as kids in Surrey, I just had a meeting with Simon Fraser, and they're looking at expanding the college that's in Surrey. And I had a lot to do to get that college here when I was mayor at the time. We brought the university here to Surrey. It's been a huge success for our kids in Surrey and for south of the Fraser. And we're going to actually expand that campus in the next few years.
Well, that campus is expanding by 110,000 square feet for their engineering department, but you can take credit for that, Doug. But the problem is that I don't care how much SkyTrain we build. I know a young fellow that's trying to get his electrical ticket. He's just got one more piece of school to go, and he's been trying to get into Kwantlen in Cloverdale for that last piece of education. He lives 300 yards from that campus. He can't get there for 2 years. He's got to go up to Thompson's Rivers University this fall and spend 3 months up in Kamloops to get his electrical ticket. That's what the problem is. We need to have the educational seats here, and it doesn't matter how much SkyTrain or LRT we have. We don't have enough seats for our kids right here in Surrey.
You know, when you're looking at
briefly.
when you're looking at the natural evolution of transportation use, you know what? There are many lanes here and lines in Surrey that have evolved from the bus to the B line and now to pass over. So Doug, what do you say to those kids that are continuing to get passed over when they're going to school?
And there is no time to answer that question because we've hit the 3-minute mark in that debate. And thank you again very much. You can take that one up outside afterward. On to another question from our audience. And Anita, you've got one more for us there, have you?
Yes, we've got lots of comments and questions coming in on Facebook Live and YouTube. People right down the middle of the debate. Common theme, though, is just get it done. We've waited long enough when it comes to LRT or SkyTrain, whatever it is. But a question from Henry Lortis. I do not think being a regional body helps with buses because some buses stop at 9 p.m. I would like to know, will they improve hours, especially SkyTrain?
All right, Doug McCallum.
Yeah, certainly I think we have to look at our whole bus system. For Surrey, it hasn't been effective. There's a lot of our communities that don't even have buses. Clayton's a good example where there's very little buses up there. We need to stand up for Surrey. The residents need to stand up and have somebody stand up and said, we need more money in transit back to Surrey for buses because our communities are growing. We're absorbing 12,000 people a year, but the bus system is terrible. It's not in our communities. It doesn't work good. It's not efficient. We need to reorganize our whole bus system in Surrey and provide a lot more buses if we're going to continue to grow at 12,000 people a day or a month.
Let me put this forward if I can. Is this all theoretical since all of this would require TransLink to sign off on everything we've been talking about? Bruce?
Well, yes, and what I've been saying right from the start when I said press the pause button on LRT and let's have a look at this. No single mayor, regardless of who gets elected mayor on October 20th, it is not up to the mayor of Surrey to decide what technology we have. It has to be done at the TransLink board, at the TransLink Mayor's Council, and with senior levels of government. We have that funding that's now been approved with that technology that has been approved. And so if there's going to be a change, and I believe there should be, then that has to be a decision at the TransLink Mayor's Council. Now, keeping in mind that half of that TransLink Mayor's Council is going to be new come November, because half of the mayors in the region aren't running again. So this is going to be a very, very different governing board in November than it is right now. And this is an opportunity for Surrey to shine and to go forward to that board and say, this is what we need, not only for Surrey, but this is what we need for the region for the coming years.
Tom Gill?
You know, I think that when you're looking at bus service and utilization, it's a really important context. I think that what we are envisioning at Surrey First is 150 kilometers of LRT. And the key difference is that we are looking for some significant north-south and east-west connections. That's what's going to make this service robust. That's what's going to permit us to get around our 6 town centers. Again, in the opening comments, we are larger than Vancouver, Richmond, and Burnaby combined. So it's really imperative that not only do we have a significant rapid transit system in our city, that in fact it gets supported by bus service. And let me be very clear, when it comes to the business plan, and when you're looking at the business plan, I'm an accountant. When you're looking at that business plan, our business plan will not support SkyTrain at the cost that it could currently come in. $2.9 billion in 2017 to go to Langley. That's not going to cut it. It's not going to make the cut. People are not going to be able to utilize it. And in fact, when the federal and provincial government, if in fact they come to the table with additional resources, they won't fund it because it won't make the business case.
3 minutes of open debate on this. Thank you. And I will again ask the question, when you have a regional board making decisions about regional transit, how much clout does a single mayor of any municipality have when it comes to their wishes and dreams and hopes?
I'll answer that because I've been involved, and as I've mentioned, I've been chair of TransLink. The TransLink board, at least at the time I was on it for 9 years, and building 2 rapid transit lines. The TransLink board at that time certainly always went with the wishes of the city that is being built, what type of system. I gave the example of Vancouver where TransLink wanted to do light rail down the Arbutus corridor. The TransLink board listened to the people of Vancouver. They wanted SkyTrain. Same for the Evergreen line. So the board will listen to what the people of Surrey decide. If the people of Surrey decide to elect myself, Doug McCallum, and the Safe Surrey Coalition, then we will on day one build or start to build SkyTrain. And the TransLink board will agree because they will say that's what the people of Surrey want. The same for the federal government with the funding. They have already indicated that the money is not going away if we don't build light rail. It's going to stay here, and they're going to open discussions with the new government that's in place. So the money's there, the money that can build it along Fraser Highway, and the TransLink board in the past anyways, as I've been on, will always listen and go with what the city of Surrey residents want.
Doug, what do you say to the 200,000 people that live on the 104th King George to 72nd on the Surrey-Newton-Guilford line? What do you say to the 200,000 people that live within 5-minute walk to the proposed LRT connection? What do you say? We've used experts, we've used every ounce of staff's ability to determine where this line is going to be successful. What do those people do when you propose to move the money and the funding from the Surrey-Newton-Guilford line to Langley? What do those people do? What does Newton do?
I think that question shows, Tom, that you don't seem to be even listening to any of our comments here. I've already said that Guilford, which holds most of those people, we're going to do rapid transit down 152nd and connect to Fraser Highway. That's only a 3-block move. That's where we're going to move them. As far as the rest of people on 104th, I've been along 104th many times, and I don't see a lot of people in ridership along 104th at this current time. So,
and what do you say to the businesses in Newton and the people in Newton? This is a big opportunity for those folks. What do you say to those people?
Because we've already talked to them, and we have said the second phase, again, if you're listening to us instead of just staying, it's typical of Surrey First, not even to listen to the residents of Surrey. But we've already said our second phase of SkyTrain is going from our city center to Newton down to South Surrey. That's the backbone. I've said this before tonight. It's the backbone of our transportation system, linking buses into that SkyTrain.
That is all the time we have for that debate. Thank you again, all three of you. And that is the end of our time to talk about the issue of transit and transportation in Surrey. My name is Stephen Quinn. I am the host of the early edition on CBC Radio 1, and you are listening to City Votes 2018, coming to you live from Newton Cultural Centre in Surrey. We have another half an hour to go where we are going to tackle an entirely different subject with our candidates rather, and our third topic is growth and development. By the year 2041, the city of Surrey is expecting that more than 775,000 people will be living here. And so how should Surrey grow and develop to accommodate all of those people, especially families, moving to this city? Do you want to see more development in areas like South Campbell Heights? Do you think rural land should be preserved? There are big questions about where all of those people will live and about the balance between urban and rural land and how much everyone will pay for housing. And like a lot of municipalities, the issue of housing and growth, very big issue. We'll ask Gerald Beyer from UBC for a question to the candidates on the issue of growth and development. Gerald.
So the province has allowed municipalities to move to rental-only zoning. Is that a potential solution for affordability and vacancy in Surrey?
You each have 1 minute to respond to that, and Bruce Hayne, you can begin.
Well, thank you. And certainly in our platform, we've identified rental-only zoning as being one of the things that we will aggressively look at, particularly in new NCPs, when we open up new NCPs, to have rental-only zoning, because we need to have purpose-built rental in our community. We haven't in Surrey really had purpose-built rentals built in the last 25 years, and so the de facto rental stock in our community is basement suites. And they come with their own set of challenges, both for the tenants and for the landlords and for the community at large. So we need to have purpose-built rentals in our community, both market and sub-market, that will address the needs of affordability in our region. But certainly, it is critically important that we don't allow the services and the facilities and the infrastructure to not keep pace with the pace of development that we have. And so we'll talk more about that as well.
Tom Gill.
No question. I think that affordability is a key issue in this community. I think that this council has done a relatively good job of increasing supply. And I think that when you're looking at simple economics, there's no question. I think that by increasing the supply, that's the only way you can curb some of the demand and curb some of the pricing. But certainly when you're looking at the future and what the future has in store, we need to look at some new opportunities that we have not looked at in the city, particularly when you're looking at inclusionary zoning, which permits you to move some of the densities, look at market and non-market rental opportunities when it relates to incentives for some of the development community. And there's no question, that's where we need to put some emphasis. And I think it was well said that, we need to ensure that, when we put in rapid transit in the city, that we have that opportunity that's going to supply additional people to utilize that rapid transit. So we need to ensure that densities are built around those rapid transit corridors. That's the way that the future is going to look, and that's something I'm very supportive of. I think there's no question. I think our youth and young need to ensure that they have a roof over their head, and that's critical.
All right, thank you. And Doug McCallum.
Yeah, we've already said a number of times we're going to pause development in the city of Surrey, and we're going to turn to smart development. Smart development means densifying along the corridors, the transit corridors, developing hubs where the stations are to put higher density housing in those areas. We've announced that we are not going to allow any land to come out of the ALR. We're going to protect the ALR because it's important for the future and important for our kids to have an agricultural component to it. On affordability, we are going to, and we have announced that we're going to have zones for rental zones that the province has indicated cities are allowed to do it. We also are going to protect trailer parks. So a lot of our seniors in Surrey live in trailer parks. We have some very large trailer parks in Surrey. They're now getting bought up by developers, and we're going to stop that and encourage actually more trailer parks in the city of Surrey for our seniors.
And that is time, Doug. Thank you very much. And now 3 minutes for an open debate on...
Yes, thank you. And when we talk about pausing development, there's no question that we need to have infrastructure that keeps up with the development, whether it be schools and hospitals and roads and transit and so on. And so we need to have a better working and partnership relationship with our senior levels of government. But it's very clear that supply does play a big part in that supply-demand equation and pushing the affordability crisis. So pausing development, in your opinion, Doug, will that not just continue to put upward pressure on housing prices? And how on earth are you going to create affordable housing if you're pausing development because you're not doing any development? So you're talking out of both sides of your mouth on this one.
No, I'm not. Pause development in cities around the world. When you talk about smart development, it's smart development, letting a development go, but get the public consulting in front of the development before we go through the exercise of.
So you're not talking about pausing it?
No, we're pausing development until the infrastructure gets done. For example, in schools, good example, if we're going to allow 200 houses to be built somewhere in Surrey, then we're going to pause that until such time as the province will allow us to build schools at the same time as the housing, so that when people do move in, their kids can then get to school. That's the smart development that cities around the world. That's not what's happening in Surrey, and we intend to change it so that we have smart development.
So Doug, you were the mayor for 9 years, and I don't recall any of those initiatives being available. In fact, I know that there's a $250 development cost charge related to opportunities for affordable housing. In fact, in favor of the development community, you had reduced that to zero. So I just want to understand, how is it that you're going to be able to support the community that's in need in the context of what you've done? We now reintroduced a development cost charge that's $1,000 per unit to help the needy people in our community. So again, I just want to ask you, why would you have reduced and eliminated that cost charge at that time? If there would have been millions of dollars that would have been built up over time, and we simply just don't have access to those funds.
That's not true, Tom. When I was mayor and we had development, we bumped the development cost charges. This is the cost that the developers have to do. We moved it up every year to the point where we had the highest development cost charges in the whole Metro Vancouver. We said to the developers, you have to pay for the services that are going in to support your housing. So we were very, very hard on developers, and we will continue to be hard, because we want the developers to recognize that they have to work with communities. Both of you doing a development in South Surrey that the community was up in arms with, and it was right on the Little Campbell River. The community was literally up in arms. You people ignored them. You went right through it. It had to be Metro Vancouver that stopped it, not you people.
And thank you very much. And I apologize because it feels like I'm always cutting you off, but we do have the clock with us, so if we stick to the clock, I won't have to cut anybody off. Appreciate that. We have another question from our audience. Anita.
All right, portables, and more portables. What are you going to do in your role as mayor to get rid of portables in Surrey schools?
All right. Something Surrey has been dealing with for a very long time. 1 minute for your answer, beginning with Tom Gill.
No questions. Portables are a huge issue in this community. I think that the commitment from the current provincial government is very significant. And in fact, in their mandate, they indicated that they'd be eliminating portables. I think it's really key for us to understand what actually is happening in our community and how we do our planning. The neighborhood concept plan that we established in the city of Surrey also comes with projections when it relates to kids and the number of people that are going to be living in individual dwellings. So we do have a planning tool. I think that there needs to be better coordination with the provincial government and the school district to ensure that the counts that we come up with are in fact correct. In fact, when we're looking at all the neighborhood concept plans that we've ever done in the city, there's only been one neighborhood concept plan that in fact had a higher count than what the reality is. So, you know, we're doing a good job on those elements, but really certainly the issue that we're faced with is just the coordination.
And Doug McCallum, 1 minute.
Yeah, I think it's very important that we get rid of portables in Surrey. You know, the people of Surrey should literally this election stand up and get out and vote, because, you know, you're not getting your share back from the province or the federal government as far as funding. You've been paying taxes in there for 30 years. You're not getting anything back. We've said as far as portables, we need to have more schools built, first of all, to get the things. We're going to pause development until such time as the province will say to us on any new developments that they're going to build the school at the same time the houses are being built. We need to get rid of portables. It's critical for our kids and our future that we get our new schools going and built. There was just one a little while ago that they announced they're going to build, and now they put a delay on it. It's time, Surrey people, stand up for your taxes that you have paid and say to the provincial government, we need more schools in the city of Surrey.
Thank you, Doug. And Bruce Hain.
Well, thank you for that. And certainly, when we look at the relationship that we have with School District 36 and with the Ministry of Education, Surrey First held every seat on council in the last term. We've held every seat, Surrey First held every seat on the school district. And in that 4-year period of time, there has been a total of 2 meetings between elected officials. That simply isn't good enough. We need to have far better communications, far better working relationship. And in fact, we had to put a moratorium on one of the NCPs in South Surrey in recent months because there was simply no school site that had been purchased. So what we're suggesting is that we need to purchase the school sites and the parkland first, before the NCP is opened up to developers, because as soon as it's opened up to developers and speculation, the school district and the Ministry of Education has to pay highest and best use for that land, which is astronomical. So we need to do that first. We need to have that planning, and we need to have that partnership with the school district and with the Ministry of Education to do this together.
Thank you, Bruce. And we will now have 3 minutes for open debate on the issue. And it's a question that has dogged Surrey for a long time. Why do we let development continue at the rate it does when there's no infrastructure to support that development? I'll throw that out there.
Yeah, I think that one of the issues that we need to deal with is the conundrum between, you know, the community that we have. We have 147,000 people in this city that work here, that are related to the trades industry, related to the supply industry, related to the construction industry. So we got a very heavy population that is utilizing the wealth that comes from the development community to be able to live. You know, they're putting bread and water on their table by utilizing the service. So what we need to do is we need to change the demographics of our community. We need to make sure that we have alternative skills in this community. I think it's imperative that we work with this community to make that sure that the future generations have that diversity that we currently don't have.
But what does that have to do with having a school for children to attend once a community plan is realized?
And that's the thing. We need to have that relationship with the school district and with the Ministry of Education, because it's no longer good enough that the municipal government says, well, we're responsible for land use, and then we point fingers at the school district and say, you're responsible for building schools, and we keep pointing at each other going, well, don't you dare build that, and don't you, well, you better build that quicker. And at the end of the day, the kids are still sitting on the floor at lunchtime or sitting in a portable all season long. And so it has to be leadership. There has to be a better way, and that is a new relationship with our school district, a new relationship with our Ministry of Education, and a new partnership that says this is where the kids are coming. The Metro Vancouver Regional Growth Strategy is very clear on this, exactly where the kids and where the families are coming to. They're coming to Surrey, they're coming south of the Fraser. We have to get together and say it is no longer acceptable as a community to underfund, and that goes for education, that goes for a second hospital in our city, that goes for rapid transit south of the Fraser, it goes for all of these things, and we need to have that new relationship.
Doug McCallum?
Yeah, I think both of you have been on council for 8 years, and why haven't you done something about this situation? You only come up with it now when it's election time. I think it's very, very important. When I was to meet with the school board, we have to work together, council and the school board. When I was mayor, we had mandatory quarterly meetings with the school board. Every 3-4 months, we met with them to go over the issues as far as new schools are concerned. And anything to do with land use, it is important to meet with the school board, because they know the figures as far as students far better than council know. They know how many new students are coming in. They know how many portables they need. And so it is absolutely critical to have those meetings with the school board and work together so that we can plan for the future. And with us pausing development, we want that infrastructure, the new schools, to catch up to the development before we will allow development to carry on.
Right on time. Look at that. Very good. Thank you. Appreciate that again, all three of you. Anita Bath, we have another audience question. In fact, we have quite a few.
We have lots. Lots of comments and questions about Uber and Lyft, so this one is about that. Obviously, it's a provincial issue, but municipal governments play a big role in this as well. With population increasing so much, people obviously need alternatives to get around. Where do you stand on Uber and Lyft coming here? And if you support it, how do you plan to ensure it will come here?
Thank you very much, Anita, and thanks for that audience question. We'll put that first to Doug McCallum. You have 1 minute.
Yeah, I've been very clear when I was mayor, and I've been very clear over the few years, is I don't support Uber at all. And the reason I don't is because they're coming into a system that's been established by the provincial government for many years as far as taxi cab licenses, the insurance, the driver's criminal checks, and all of the systems that are needed to make sure that the cars are safe. Uber doesn't follow those rules, and they came in and they come into many cities, and I've talked to other cities around the world. There is a huge number of lawsuits against them because they don't follow the rules. And so I will not support, at least in the city of Surrey, Uber coming in. I think what the provincial government needs to do is issue more. They do not issue taxi licenses. They need to issue more taxi licenses so that we have more taxis on the street.
That is time. Thank you very much, Bruce Hain.
Well, it certainly is a provincial issue to regulate Uber, and I'm glad when you were mayor that you didn't support Uber, because it was a twinkle in some engineer's eye back then, 16 years ago. But let's face it, Uber works very, very well around the world. I've used it in Toronto, I've used it in Europe and elsewhere. But the thing of it is that there has to be a level playing field. And if we're going to introduce ride sharing into our communities, we have to ensure, first of all, the safety. And one of the things that council does, and it's not a very pleasant job that we do, but in closed council every so often at meetings, we review taxi licenses that have been denied by the RCMP. And so the taxi driver is allowed to come to us and say why he should keep his license or not. And so we debate on that and look at those issues of whether a taxi driver should keep his license. And those are checks and balances that are critical to ensuring the safety in our community. So if there are a level playing field for insurance and for chauffeur licenses and for checks and balances like that, I'd be in favor of it.
Tom Gill.
You know, I think that Councillor Hain made a few comments that are very relative. I think that the key for the taxi industry is to ensure that there in fact is a level playing field. I think that the biggest concern that the taxi industry continues to tell us is that they are at a disadvantage when it comes to competing. And I think the disadvantage really comes from several sources, one being the insurance requirements that are required for them, and also the requirements as it relates to their chauffeur permit, and also the requirements, minimum requirements for a car, and how a car is equipped. So I think that the industry themselves have indicated that they're not against ride-sharing programs, but they certainly want a level playing field. And I think from my perspective, there's no question. I think that a level playing field is most paramount, and I think that we need to be able to achieve that prior to be able to consider any alternatives.
We can open up the floor for 3 minutes to talk a little more about this, and not just specifically Uber and Lyft, but about transportation alternatives. I mean, does a city like Surrey not need transportation alternatives? If you speak to people from Toronto about the success of Uber or Lyft, they will tell you that it's wildly successful in that city.
Well, yes, it is, and certainly as a last mile solution for rapid transit, things like Uber and Lyft are very, very critical in many, many cities around the world. And when we look at Metro Vancouver and the size of Metro Vancouver, 22 municipalities, we all know that many young people and some of us go down to hockey games on a Saturday night and so on. It's almost impossible to get back to Surrey or to any of the outlying areas from Vancouver with the current taxi system. So I think there needs to be more flexibility from the taxi industry, and I think if there's some pressure that there is an alternative potentially coming in, and there's other apps and other solutions that are being made available to people, people, that they too will be more competitive. I'd love to see our taxi industry being as competitive as they possibly can and be as profitable and as successful as they can. But that means opening up and having an open market for competition.
Yeah, I think it's imperative to understand that, you know, when you're looking at this industry, there needs to be service 24/7. That's the key. And I think that you know, one of the concerns that's in the market is that many of the Uber drivers are only coming out at the times when there's available rides. I think that when you're looking at the capital costs associated to a taxi, they are very significant. In fact, the market has changed considerably as it relates to those capital investments. So what we need to do is we need to make sure that we have an environment that's going to be conducive to not only ride-sharing programs, but making it that same level playing field for the taxi drivers that currently own and operate those cabs.
Doug?
Yeah, I think one of the things is SkyTrain. To give you an example, today when I was out door knocking in Clayton, the person said that once SkyTrain gets to Clayton, he'll be able to take a suitcase on SkyTrain and get to the airport by coming through on rapid transit and then onto the Canada line. It's that type of new transit that the City of Surrey needs to use. And another good example is that a lot of cities in the world, the bus lanes that carry the buses, taxis are allowed to go onto those bus lanes, and it speeds up the service and speeds up the fact that they're available. But I think above all that we need to encourage the provincial government to release a lot more licenses for taxis, so there is a lot more taxi cars on the road. I understand the taxi industry is also developing very quickly and may have already developed an app that they can start to use, that you will be able to use on your iPhones and everything, the same as you would use for Uber. So once that app comes out, I think you'll see the taxi industry modernize the way that they provide the service to the people in Metro Vancouver.
Thank you, all three of you. We're out of time on that one. And now it's time to begin to bring the evening to a close. To that end, I would like to ask each candidate for a closing statement. You will each have 90 seconds to tell us why Surrey residents should vote for you in the election coming up later this month. And we have drawn the order earlier on, and so we will begin with Doug McCallum, 90 seconds.
Thank you very much. It was a real pleasure to be here, and thank all of you for coming out, and for those that are listening on the radio or online also. I want to talk a little bit about our Safe Surrey Coalition and the members that make up that coalition. They are people from all over Surrey. They're equal women and men. They come from different professions. They have different cultures. They all have jobs which they have put on hold during this election to run in the election. They are a fabric of Surrey. They represent all the different areas from one corner to every corner in Surrey. They're the finest group of people that I've seen in my time in Surrey of over 50 years that want to represent you people in the city of Surrey. They're enthusiastic. They are very, very active in their community, and that's what makes this coalition so great, is they have been in their communities for 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 40 years. Working in your communities throughout Surrey, helping you people in nonprofit groups, working to solve the problems in their communities and so forth. They've all come together with independent thinking, and they're going to vote independently, but they all believe in three causes, and that is Surrey's own police department, SkyTrain, and to pause development, turn to smart development.
Thank you, Doug McCallum. And now Bruce Hain, 90 seconds.
Well, thank you, Stephen. And I moved to Surrey 26 years ago and started my family here. Lived in Cloverdale for those 26 years. Had a business since that time. And gave back to the community each and every day I've lived here. I've been past president of the Board of Trade. I've sat on the board of directors of the Surrey Memorial Hospital Foundation, and I currently sit on the Sources Community Resource Society Foundation as their president, because I really believe in this community. I really believe in giving back to this community, and I believe that that's what's so important, is working for a Surrey that we love each and every day. I started Integrity Now as a new slate because I really believe that there's a new way and a better way to do things at City Hall, a way that's fair for absolutely everybody concerned, a way that is transparent and open for everybody, and a way that's collaborative with community groups, collaborative with faith-based groups, collaboratively with parent groups, and as well as senior levels of government, so that we can come up with better solutions to the issues that we have. We are going to always have significant issues in our community. Each election, each day, each year, we're going to be grappling with important issues of public safety, of transit, of how we grow as a community, of how we get the infrastructure and how we fund the infrastructure that we need to have a livable community that we're all very proud of.
Bruce, I know it looks like there is time left on the clock. There is, in fact, none. I'm sorry. Someone set a clock for 2 minutes rather than 90 seconds. My apologies. You're on a roll.
I was enjoying it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Once again, Tom, for some reason, again, the clock is reading 2 minutes.
Understood.
So if you end when there's 30 seconds left on it, we'd appreciate that.
Sure. You know what, I just want to reflect on my past. I came here 32 years ago. I was 18 years old. And at that time, every day I'd turn on the radio with CFOX. And in that radio station, every day someone would be making a critical joke of Surrey. You know, there's no question. Everybody knows that in this room. And, you know, for me, it was unacceptable at that time. And in fact, things have changed. You know, today, Surrey is not what that city was 32 years ago. There's a lot of respect in the city, and the city has come a long way. You know, for me, it's about imagining. It's imagining about what a 21st century could look like. It's about imagining what everybody wants in this room. It's about imagining having a place and having a place to go. It's about imagining how you have a vision for the city. It's about civic pride. You know what? This is something that's been lacking in the city for many years. I want to be very critical and tell everybody it's most important thing is that when you have civic pride in this community, nothing else matters. You know, we want to show the region that, you know, we are the best at everything that we do. We have the best facilities. We have the best city hall. We have the best civic plazas. We have every opportunity that our youth needs. That's where it starts and that's where it ends. You know what? Unless you're proud here, it doesn't matter. And that's the goal that we have on Surrey First. So on October 20th, please vote for Tom Gill and the Surrey First team. Thank you.
Thank you very much, all three of you, for taking the time with us this evening. We appreciate it, and I think you've set up Surrey voters quite well to make a decision when the time comes. Thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Steve.
And I'd like to thank our studio audience as well for being here tonight, and for those listening and watching on CBC Radio and Facebook and CBC.ca. Thank you for joining us as well. On October 17th, CBC Vancouver and, again, the University of British Columbia will co-host a mayoral debate in Vancouver. That will take place at the CBC studios. Time to thank everyone who helped put the program together. Anita Bath, our audience reporter, UBC political scientist Gerald Beyer, CBC reporter Jesse Johnston, our technicians Ray Wong, Matthias Wolfson, Chris Robinson back in Studio 10, and thank you to our partners at the University of British Columbia. We'd also like to thank Carol Girardi and the Newton Cultural Center and Arts Council of Surrey for hosting us. Rohit Joseph, Bridget Watson here on the floor. Tamara Baluja, our digital producer. Teresa Duval, Jennifer Chen produced the debates. And thank you once again so much to our candidates this evening for taking the time to answer our questions and questions from our audience. Do make sure to get out and cast a vote on October 20th. Thank you so much for joining us, and have a good night. Thanks so much, guys. Thank you.